The midwife did not answer. A nub of unease had lodged deep in her gut. There was something peculiar about this baby, and it was not just her unsettling silence. Leaning forward, she sniffed the infant. Just as she had suspected, a powdery, musky scent that wasn't of this world. Placing the newborn on her knees, the woman turned her over onto her tummy and slapped her bottom, once, twice. The small face registered the shock, the pain. Her hands clenched into fists. Her mouth drew into a tight pucker, and still no noise came. "What's wrong?" The midwife sighed. "Nothing. It's just, I think she's still with them." "Who's them?" asked Binaz, but, not wanting to hear the answer, she added in haste. "Then do something." The old woman considered. It was better if the baby found her own way at her own pace. Most newborns adapted instantly to their new environments, but a few chose to hang back, as though hesitating whether or not to join the rest of humanity. And who could blame them? In all her years, the midwife had seen plenty of babies who, either moments before or right after their births, were so intimidated by the force of life oppressing in from all sides that they lost heart and quietly departed this world. Kada. People called it destiny and said no more, because people always gave simple names to the complex things that frightened them. But the midwife believed that some babies merely chose not to give life a try, as though they knew, and preferred to avoid, the hardships ahead. Were they cowards, or were they as wise as the great Solomon himself? Who could tell? "Bring me salt," the midwife said to the neighborhood women. She could have used snow as well, had there been enough of it freshly piled outside. In the past, she had submerged many a newborn in a heap of pristine snow, pulling them out at just the right moment. The shock of the cold opened their lungs, made their blood flow, boosted their immunity. These infants had, without exception, grown up to be strong adults. In a little while, the neighbors returned with a large plastic bowl and a bag of rock salt. The midwife affectionately placed the infant in the middle of the bowl and began to rub her skin with salt flakes. Once the baby stopped smelling like one of the angels, they would have to set her free. Outside in the upper branches of the poplar tree a bird trilled, a blue jay by the sound of it. A single crow cawed as it flew towards the sun. Everything spoke in its own language, the wind, the grass. Everything but this child. "Maybe she's mute?" said Binaz. The midwife arched her eyebrows. "Be patient." As though on cue, the baby started to cough. A rattling, throaty sound. She must have swallowed a bit of salt. The taste sharp and unexpected. Flushing crimson, the infant smacked her lips and scrunched up her face, but still refused to cry. How stubborn she was, how dangerously rebellious her soul. Simply rubbing her with salt was not going to be enough. That was when the midwife came to a decision. She would have to try a different approach. "Bring me more salt." There being no more rock salt left in the house, table salt would have to do. The midwife made a hole in the pile, placed the baby in it and covered her fully with the white crystals, first her body, then her head. "What if she suffocates?" asked Binaz. "Don't worry, babies can hold their breath longer than we can." "But how can you tell when to take her out?" "Hush, listen," said the old woman, placing a finger on her chapped lips. Underneath the sheath of salt, the baby opened her eyes and stared into the milky nothingness. It felt lonely in here, but she was used to loneliness. Curling into herself as she had done for months, she bided her time. Her gut said, "Oh, I like it here, I'm not going up there again." Her heart protested, "Don't be silly. Why stay in a place where nothing ever happens? It's boring. Why leave a place where nothing ever happens? It's safe," her gut said. Baffled by their quarrel, the baby waited. Another full minute passed. Emptiness swirled and splashed around her, lapping at her toes, at her fingertips. Just because you think it's safe here, it doesn't mean this is the right place for you, her heart countered. Sometimes where you feel most safe is where you least belong. At last, the baby reached a conclusion. She would listen to her heart, the same one that would prove to be quite a troublemaker. Keen to go out and discover the world, despite its dangers and difficulties, she opened her mouth, ready to release a sound, but almost at once salt poured down her throat, blocked her nose. Immediately, the midwife, with movements deft and swift, thrust her hands into the bowl and pulled the baby out. A loud, terrified wail filled the room. All four women smiled with relief. "Good girl," said the midwife. "What took you so long? Cry, my dear. Never be ashamed of your tears. Cry and everyone knows you're alive." The old woman wrapped the baby in a shawl and sniffed her again. That beguiling, otherworldly scent had evaporated, leaving only the slightest trace behind. In time that, too, would disappear, although she had known quite a few people who, even in old age, still carried with them a whiff of paradise. But she felt no need to share this information. Lifting herself onto the balls of her feet, she laid the infant on the bed, beside her mother. Binaz broke into a smile, a flutter in her heart. She touched her daughter's toes through the silky fabric, perfect and beautiful, and frighteningly fragile. She tenderly held the baby's locks of hair between her hands as if she were carrying holy water in her palms. For a moment she felt happy, complete. "No dimples," she said, and giggled to herself. "Shall we call your husband?" asked one of the neighbors. This, too, was a sentence laden with unspoken words. By now Suzanne must have told Haran that the baby had arrived, so why hadn't he come running? Clearly, he had lingered to talk to his first wife and soothe her worries. That had been his priority. A shadow passed over Binaz's face. Yes, call him. There was no need. In a few seconds, Haran walked in slouching, round-shouldered, moving out of the shadow into the sunlight. He had a shock of graying hair that gave him the look of a distracted thinker, an imperious nose with tight nostrils, a broad, smooth-shaven face and downturned dark brown eyes, shining with pride. Smiling, he approached the bed. He looked at the baby, at the second wife, at the midwife, at the first wife, and finally upwards to the heavens. "Allah, I thank you, my lord. You've accepted my prayers." "A girl," said Binaz softly, in case he was not yet aware. "I know. The next one will be a boy. We'll name him Tarkan." He ran his index finger across the baby's forehead, as smooth and warm to the touch as a favorite amulet rubbed too many times. "She's healthy, that's what matters. I was praying this whole time. I said to the Almighty, if you let this baby live, I won't drink anymore. Not a single drop. Allah has heard my plea, He is merciful. This baby is not mine, nor is she yours." Binaz stared at him, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. Suddenly, she was seized by a feeling of foreboding, like a wild animal that senses, albeit too late, that it is about to walk into a trap. She glanced at Suzanne, who was standing by the entrance, lips pursed so tight they were almost white, silent and motionless save for the impatient tapping of her foot. Something about her demeanor suggested that she was excited, overjoyed even. "This baby belongs to God," Haran was now saying. "All babies do," murmured the midwife. Oblivious, Haran held his younger wife's hand and looked straight into her eyes. "We'll give this baby to Suzanne." "What are you talking about?" Binaz rasped, her voice sounding to her ears wooden and distant, the voice of a stranger. "Let Suzanne raise her. She'll do an excellent job. You and I will make more children." "No. You don't want to have more kids? I'm not going to let that woman take my daughter." Haran drew in a breath, then released it slowly. "Don't be selfish. Allah won't approve. He gave you a baby, didn't he? Be grateful. You were barely scraping by when you came to this house,